Welcome to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. This episode is brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, delivering the latest news, ideas, and inspiration across the multifamily sector. Now let's go ahead and jump into the next episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. Thank you for joining another episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. I'm your host, Bill Nye, and joining me this morning is someone I've known for a very long time. He's had a very successful career in property management, and that's Mike Holmes of Eastland Management out of South Carolina. Mike is their president and CEO, been with them for over 38 years. Mike, thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Bill. It's a pleasure to see you again. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And so we were chatting before we started the recording. Mike is a grandfather, has an 8-year-old granddaughter, and probably one of the greatest titles you carry is that of grandpa. Am I right?
Absolutely. Yeah, she's a real treasure. I call her Bug, and we just have a great time together. And she's my one and only, so she gets an awful lot of attention.
Gets all the attention, I'm sure. I have 3 granddaughters, so I have to split between the 3 of them, and sometimes I can be challenging. It's the greatest. It's a greatest experience, as you know. But Mike, you also recently were inducted into the NAA Hall of Fame. Tell us real quick, what was that like? How did that feel?
It was almost overwhelming, Bill. When I got the call, I was actually in my car to tell me that I had been elected, and I literally almost had a wreck. I had to pull the car over. I just never considered myself to be worthy of something like that, and it was just quite an experience, something I'll never forget. I'll always remember. It's quite an honor.
So, I was so thrilled for you at that moment, and I sent you a message and congratulated you because I just thought it was so well deserving. Mike, I'm going to share something with you. I don't know, a whole lot about your past life before you and I met. But as you know, I served in the United States Air Force, and, my time in the military, I served under 2 different types of commanders. Those who wanted to win awards, medals, and promotions for themselves, and those who wanted to see the men and women they led win medals and promotions. And the thing that really excited me about this was I said to myself, Mike Holmes is not the kind of guy who sits around at home and fantasizes about one day being elected into the Hall of Fame. He's the kind of guy that
like you said, it never crossed my mind.
Surprised and probably, feels unworthy of the recognition, but you're not.
Yeah, and to me, it's never all about one person anyway. I got all the attention, but there were an awful lot of people that helped make things happen during my year.
So that's why I wanted to talk to you, because you have a stellar reputation. You've accomplished a lot. And in the 30 years that I've been involved in the industry, in the multifamily industry, I've seen a lot of things change, and we're seeing tremendous changes now. Changes that are making the job way more challenging. But I like to talk about leadership and culture on my podcast, and so through the years, you've seen a lot of things change. How has that affected the way you lead, maybe today versus how you led 20 years ago?
Well, I think there's a lot of challenges there, Bill, and a lot of it has to do with AI. We've changed how we communicate with each other. There's a lot less face-to-face interaction with a lot of our employees on a regular basis. Instead, we're doing Zoom calls and podcasts and things of that nature like this. And so I don't think that we have a chance to be, just really close and in front of one another to be able to have that mentoring kind of access that you might ordinarily have. We're a lot more distant and we're a lot less personal. And I think that's had a lot to do with it. But I think over the years since you and I first started, I remember you came and spoke to the Upper State Apartment Association, my president year then, which is back in the 1800s, I think. But since then, it continues to evolve about just leadership training. You go into Barnes and Noble or some bookstore, and there's hundreds and hundreds of books about leadership of all different kinds. And now we've got people like you that are speaking and doing seminars and so forth. So there's a lot of emphasis being put on it, and it's evolving in how we manage to cope with the things that are coming now with AI and more distance and not a lot of personal touch. So I think those have become real challenges for us since you and I kind of got started.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because I would imagine that someone like yourself, that one-on-one mentoring and that personal connection and building that relationship is probably something that's been very important to you. And so you're saying that that's become more challenging.
Yeah, when I was coming along, I had the sort of the added problem. I've always had this little fear of failure, not quite have the confidence in myself to step up or raise my hand or anything, but I was very observant about other people that were in leadership position to see, okay, this is somebody I would like to emulate. This is somebody I would not. And you get that opportunity to sort of build your leadership style by what you see other people doing, either positively or negatively. And I think that's become more of a challenge now. And it's one of the things, I mean, I'm not the only company out there that does it, but it's one of the things that gives smaller companies like Eastland Management Company a little bit of an advantage in this category, in that we can spend a little bit more personal time. I'm able to get out to visit the properties and know who some of the people are on the properties. And a lot of companies, just for size purposes, just don't have that opportunity. But I think that's what we're trying as an industry, at least in the apartment industry, is what we're trying to overcome, is ways to cope with that. Because we've not only got the AI thing going, but we've also got a lot more diversity now in our workforce, and how we work with people and deal with people gets even more challenging. More men, more women, more people of color, just a lot of different cultures represented, and so it's a real challenge to be able to make that connection.
So one of the things that I study very closely, I talk a lot about, I ask a lot of questions because I really want to have a better understanding. But it seems to me that the expectations of the person coming to the workplace has changed drastically. And you and I could reminisce back on when we were kids, and our dad would go to work. And if our dad woke up and didn't feel well, our dad still went to work, right? It was a very different time, and nobody's asking anyone to do that now. But that's just a small example, at least in my opinion, of the expectations of the workforce today. What have you seen in terms of the expectations of the people we lead? What do they need more of, and what do they need less of, maybe?
Well, and you hit on a fine line there, because how much is too much. Sometimes our dads, like you said, they drag themselves in, and maybe that wasn't the best thing to do. So I think we have that kind of problem to deal with. But I think proper motivation is real important, and it doesn't need to be negative motivation, sort of a positive motivation to not just have to go to work, but actually to want to go to work to be more productive. I think now we're probably, for the first time in history, we've got 4 different generations that are working in the workforce together. And so we all bring in a little bit of different set of values. And we've all run into the situation where you have a employee maybe that's just not very motivated and has to be stayed on all the time. And we're in a much faster moving society and much faster commerce, where we have to be able to be on time. We have to be able to be working and be able to keep up. And I think all of those things are qualities that are kind of hard to find in some cases. And our challenge is sort of like we've talked about, is to motivate and train to bring people into that level. I think as we continue to get into the EI era, we're going to be seeing more and more of that. And I think that, back to your original question, I think that's still another part of the issue. I mean, at my age, I'm getting kind of where I'm not capable of learning too much more about AI. I'm glad I hire people that are smarter than me in that. But the challenges keep changing of what is expected to be known by our workforce as they come into our industry. I mean, on our side, more and more, we're dependent more on computers, and we're dependent on software programs that are getting much more sophisticated. My 8-year-old granddaughter, since you speak to it, she knows how to do a lot of this stuff better than I do. And so that's just kind of where we are. That's what we have to deal with, but it is a challenge.
So have you found that the customers, the market, are they embracing these changes? We're trying to move towards, AI, and, my wife and I have this conversation all the time. And, I know I'm going to sound like the angry old man standing on my porch yelling, "Get off my lawn." But when I hear a song on the radio or, wherever, I hear it, I like to believe that a human being wrote the lyrics, wrote the music. When I read a book, I want to know that a human being actually penned every word. I recently released my book, Culture Grows, and I was very specific very intentional not to use GPT or any other technology. I wanted every word to come from my soul, if you will. That was important to me. And so, we're moving towards this of using more AI, and understand the need for it and the benefits of it. But are you finding that the market likes this shift, or do they prefer the human interaction?
Well, I think that depends, I think, again, on the generational differences. My generation probably not much as much in favor of that, but younger people are embracing some of that. But I think, at least in our industry, we're starting to sort of figure out where the limits are. For example, allowing a prospect for renting an apartment to come and do their own self-guided tour. Now, there's people out there that'll disagree with me, but at least in some of our markets where we've tried some of that thing, it just has not been well received. And I'm really convinced that for whatever good AI does in our industry, I think it's always going to require the people touch. I don't know that we're ever going to get away from that. But I think we're just exploring and testing to see just where the limits are. And, if people want to use Chat GPT or whatever it is to get the perfect writing, instead of just having something that's actually come out of somebody's head or out of their heart, that's a choice the generations will make. I'm like you. I like a book that was written by somebody. I like music that was produced by somebody. But more and more, we're trying to test to see where can we do it. And it doesn't fit in all. This is not exactly on topic, but I'm reading a biography about Elon Musk. And he's very, very much into AI and stuff. But he talked about some of their assembly lines for where they're making the Tesla car, and even when they're making some of their rockets, where he actually, long story short, learned that there's some things people just do better than a computer can do. And so in some of their factories where they thought they were getting high efficiency, they realized that they would get better efficiency actually having a person do it. So I think in our industry, we're still probing on where it best fits and where it doesn't. And hopefully I'll be retired by the time it gets to any further along. I don't know if I can manage any of that anymore.
Well, Mike, I will tell you, when that day comes and you ride off into the sunset, you're going to leave a big hole. The old saying is everybody's replaceable, but I actually don't believe that to be true. I say that some people are just so gifted in what they do that no one can replace them. Because if everyone was replaceable, then why did the Chicago Bulls stop winning NBA championships when Michael Jordan retired, right? Because you can't replace a Michael Jordan.
No, and I wouldn't want myself compared to Michael Jordan either, or Larry Bird, or George Foreman, or Muhammad Ali, or anybody like that. But I do get your point. There are some people that are basically life changers. And, certainly those people like Michael Jordan, they changed the face of basketball.
Well, news alert, I think I just compared you to Michael Jordan or Larry Bird. I think you're going to leave a huge hole when you ride off to the sunset. But I'm going to shift gears a little bit, because, again, I like the perspective of someone like you who's been doing it consistently for so many years. And I think there's just, I love to have conversations with people who have a lot of experience, a lot of history. There's so much we can learn from those people, and I'm not saying that you're old, but you've been doing it for a very long time and been doing it very consistently. So there's been a lot of movement in society on feelings. And so now, we're having to manage a lot of feelings at work. And I wonder if you've noticed that we're having to pay more attention to how people feel these days, and how has that affected the way that you communicate and the way that you lead, if in fact that is the case?
I guess I'm at a place right now where I'm not so day to day involved. And to back up a little bit, I am old. In case there's any doubt about it, I am old. But yeah, I think still feelings and emotions. Again, I think it's because, in my opinion, part of it is because we're just dealing with generational differences. And I think we're dealing with diversity issues. And I think that we're learning how to deal with all of those things. And I think we're making great progress. I'm not sure that we're there yet, but it's really hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes without knowing more about them and their backgrounds and the differences in cultures and so forth. But I really do think that we're getting there. But I think it's a definite need of attention.
So, you made the comment that it's more challenging, to have that personal interaction. And so if feelings are such an important factor in terms of those relationships, and yet we're kind of moving to where we have less interaction, it sounds to me like, we're on a collision course of not giving people the personal attention because we're moving to more technology and, like you said, Zoom and Teams and that sort of thing, to where maybe we don't have the perspective that we need to have to effectively communicate and lead other people.
Yeah, and I'm not sure we're there yet, but I can't argue your point. I think we could easily get to that place because, for all of the good AI brings, it is a very unemotional process, and there's no real feelings involved. It's very impersonal. And, I've grown up in an industry that had a lot of, human face to face, touch to touch, that kind of thing. And now we're not going to be having quite as much of that. But again, I think the part of the process for most of us is just learning where AI fits in best with our business and the people we try to do business with, and then what would come along with that. I can tell you that in our corporate office, I've got somebody that's been with me for almost ever since we started. She's been with me over 32 years. I've got a couple of regionals and some other people that have been with me over 10 or 12 years. And that is, at least in part, is we have a connection, and it almost comes like a family of sorts. And I think that's what's really hard to do. We try to encourage developing that kind of environment in our properties to the extent that we can. But then at the same time, business is business, and some things just have to be done, and sometimes it's not personal. You just have to do it. But yeah, I think that it's definitely there's a crossroads coming here as to how far we let it go and what are going to be the consequences of that.
So when, in your 38 plus years, when did people, in your opinion, when did people really start focusing on their culture as a company?
Oh, me. Well, and I can't put a date on it, but we went through a period there where everybody started needing to have a mission statement.
Right.
And I think that's kind of where it all started.
Okay.
And I can tell you there's an awful lot of mission statements sitting in dusty desk drawers somewhere because they made them too big, too long, too complicated. And it's just like I'll use the term word salad in a different way. But yeah, I think that's kind of where it started, the realization that we needed to have more of a way to be connected with each other and to have some kind of defined culture for our companies. And I'm thinking that that's kind of what defined it. And we have a very brief mission statement that's supported by 10 things to kind of support it that go along with it. But we had a company-wide effort to write our policy in our mission statement that ended up being about 3 or 4 sentences long. But I wanted something that meant something and something that everybody could memorize and everybody could recite. And so we gathered a lot of information from we just had all of our properties give us their input, and then we hired a company to help us put it all together. And so we came up with something that we really like, that's easy to understand and easy to memorize, and even easy to live by. So we feel like that helps enrich our culture a little bit. And I imagine that's kind of what everybody else is doing, which is trying to find a way that connects us to the common cause that we have in our companies.
Yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot. Would you mind sharing what that mission statement is?
The mission statement of Eastland Management Company is to focus and deliver exceptional value and satisfaction to our clients, to our residents, and to our employees, building a level of trust with all.
So that's the what, and then I'm guessing then from there you began to build the how behind that, because
that comes as a little bit more of a challenge. We have those written down for us, but
right. To your point, I think what happened with a lot of companies is they wrote a mission statement that looks good, sounds good, but the truth of the matter is, you talked about it and it just ends up in somebody's drawer. And to me, that's not a mission statement. That's a marketing statement. That's something that you put out there to try and trick people into believing you're something that you're not. And, a mission statement to me is, this is how, when people talk about us, this is how I want them to feel about us while they talk about us. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, we want them to see the truth in it.
Yeah, right.
Do our clients really think that our focus is on them? Do our residents really think that our focus is on them? What proof do we have of that? And then I have to answer that same question for my employees. Do they see our genuine concern and interest for their well-being? So, yeah.
But then you have to lead your team through multiple layers to actually execute on that, to bring that to life.
Yeah. So they have, in every property we have, this mission statement is posted. And then we also, each property has a mirror that's got Eastland Management Company engraved in it. But that's all. The mirror, and then at the bottom it says, "You are Eastland Management Company." And the challenges that I give them is, you look in that mirror every day, and that helps you remember who you represent. And people are going to judge us by how you act. So
are we giving our next generation of leaders? Because, my wife works in the industry, and I listen to her. She comes home. She's an incredibly passionate, really gifted, intelligent woman. And I listen to her and how much she cares about the people she leads. And I love watching how these people get. I've never been associated with anyone who has so many people get promoted. And I know it's because of the mentoring and the leadership they're getting from her. So my question to you is, are we giving, as a whole, are we giving the next generation the tools that they need, the training, the leadership, so that one day they'll be in your chair and be effective like you've been effective for almost 40 years?
Yeah, well, and there are other people that are experts in this stuff, and you're probably one of them. I don't consider myself to be that, but to me, I think that we're doing more now than we ever have done in the leadership emphasis and training people how to be better leaders. And you can go to seminars and you can read books, and there's all different ways to do it. I know the National Apartment Association and our state and local associations all have some kind of leadership emphasis week. But I think that one of the things to me that's really important is recognizing that personalities are going to have to be considered into the leadership style. And it's not as simple as just saying, do these 5 points and you're going to be a great leader. And so you have to kind of take all that stuff and see how kind of it fits in with your own person, and see what seems to appeal the most. And over the years, I think I told you earlier, I learned a lot just by observing. And sometimes I observed what people did that I never wanted to do. I saw the negative side, and then sometimes I see the positive side. But I will tell you, I realize there's a lot of people out there that are not Christians or spiritually led or something. But the most powerful words I have ever heard in leadership were two words, and it came from Jesus of Nazareth when he came to start his ministry on earth. He said two words: "Follow me."
I
And
knew
whether you
that's what
want
you
to
were going to
believe
say.
that in a Christian
Yeah.
concept, but it fits in our worldly concept. Follow me. If you want to learn how to be a leader, follow me. But that's a tremendous challenge to me, to ask somebody to follow me and hopefully be the kind of person that somebody would want to try to follow. But according to Scripture, Jesus turned the world upside down with two words and 12 ordinary people. And to me, that's a great example, and it's a great inspiration for me every day to try not to be Jesus, but to try to live what I teach and what I preach.
Right. Yeah, no, look, that's one of the things I've always admired about you. And I could even see that from a distance, that your faith is very important to you and it guides your actions and it guides the way you treat other people. And I've always admired that about you and have tremendous respect for you because of that. And so, when you started going down that path, I knew exactly what you were going to say. I knew you were going to say, "Follow me."
You've probably heard me say
And
it before.
I know I've never heard you say it before, quite frankly, but I knew that's where you're going with that. So I look in the mirror. You talked about looking in the mirror, and I'm about to turn 64.
You're a youngster.
And so, but you and I are that generation that, we're looking at retirement, right? We're looking at riding off into the sunset. And to me, one of the things I want to do before it's all over is I want to make sure I've done everything I can to prepare the next generation of leaders to lead effectively. I like what you said about, the personalities, because I think you have to lead with authenticity. I don't want anybody to lead the way that Bill Nye has led or the way that Mike Holmes has led. I want people to lead, in an authentic, genuine way based on their own values, their principles, their faith, all the things that drive us and shape us and make us who we are. And that's one of the things I want to do through this podcast. And that's why I wanted to have you on, is because, I think about this a lot. Are we preparing the next generation of leaders, to fill in and, lead in a way that, inspires other people and enriches other people's lives? Because I think at the end of the day, leadership isn't about what I gain, but it's about what I give. I know you have lived with that philosophy. Maybe you have not put it that way, but you've lived with that philosophy. So I thought it was important to bring you on and have that conversation before it's too late.
Yeah, well, I thank you for that. And you have had a great impact. You have traveled the country, maybe the world for all I know. I don't get the chance to speak to you very often because you don't always come into our area and we just miss each other. But yeah, you've had a tremendous impact, and I was floored and very honored to be invited to be on your program. I'd like to add one more thing to the leadership thing, if I can.
Please do.
Because if I have time, this my personal experience. I mentioned earlier that I had a little bit of a fear of failure that always kept me back. I'm never going to be the guy to raise my hand first or to volunteer first. And I had to be coaxed into running for executive committee with NAA. But I was frightened of my chair year before we knew what that was going to be, because there were so many people of influence. I won't name names, but we had on the executive committee people from Graystar, people from Pinnacle, now Cushman Wakefield, people from Lincoln, Willow Ridge, other large influential management companies. And here's me, little Eastland Management Company. Now I thought, what in the world do I have that I can bring to the table? But at the end of the day, I figured out it's not about what you know. Now, what you know kind of helps, but it's not what you know, it's how you know how to put it together. And there were plenty of people around that room that knew a whole lot more than me, but they weren't looking to me for that. They were just looking to me to help us. Okay, let's come up with a consensus and what do we do with this? And so I learned a valuable lesson that it's not really so much about how much intellectual knowledge you have. It's just what your experience helps you to be able to make decisions on. And we need to do a better job of teaching that to people.
Yeah. You may find this interesting, but the minute you said, shared that you have a fear of failure, I 100% relate. I have been driven my entire life with this tremendous fear of failure. As a kid playing sports, I had a terrible fear of failure. Serving as an executive for a management company, I had this terrible fear of failure, and it's always been part of my identity. It's what drives me to to gain more knowledge. And look, you've seen me before, and you've seen me fail before. I've done and said some things like, I cannot believe I did that or said that. I've made some terrible mistakes as I've kind of navigated down this road, but I can certainly relate to that, that you and I are not alone in that, dynamic of having this fear of failure. Listen, I hope, so I'm going to be in Columbia for the South Carolina Apartment Association State Conference in May, and don't know if you'll be there, but I hope you'll be there so I'm
planning to be there.
Well, great. We'll have a chance to see each other face to face.
Well, and I'll come to your program and say maybe you can teach me a little bit.
Well, I'd be honored to have
salvaged
you.
Yet.
Yeah, we'll be the grandpa club.
There you go.
All girls. We've got 4 between us, and I've got my 4th granddaughter on the way. She's due in March, so
wow.
We'll have 5 between us. But I'm carrying more of the water than you are, Mike. You need to start carrying some more buckets of water here with the granddaughters.
Well, I've tried all I know to try, and it just hasn't worked. I think that we're going to have to just be happy with one. But there are advantages to that too, because I can give her my full attention, and we have a good time together.
Well, Mike, thank you for joining me. It's great to see you and catch up with you and spend this time. And I know our audience will enjoy your humble approach to leadership. I think that's probably the best way to put it, is you've always struck me as a man who lives his life in a very humble fashion. And I respect you and admire you for that. So I'm not surprised that you had to be convinced to join the executive committee with NAA, but you did great things while you were there, and congratulations on your induction into the NAA Hall of Fame. Well deserved, and your many, many years of success. I've enjoyed having you on.
Well, thank you for having me on. I'm honored and privileged to be a part of this and be a part of your industry and what you do, and you have a great impact. Trust me, I know you have.
Well, thank you, Mike.
You're spoken well of everywhere I go. So thank you for having me. It's good to see you, and I look forward to seeing you in Columbia.
Well, folks, thank you for joining another episode of Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye, and look forward to seeing you on our next episode. Thanks for tuning in to Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, like, leave a review, and share it with your network. And remember, this podcast is proudly brought to you by Multifamily Media Network, your trusted source for stories, trends, and insights in multifamily living. I appreciate you checking out my episode. I'm Bill Nye, and this was Leading Your Culture with Bill Nye.